There comes a moment when you realize that not everyone deserves an explanation. Not everyone deserves access to your thoughts, your plans, your wounds, or the version of you that is still trying to heal. And that moment can feel almost frightening because for so long you may have believed that if people misunderstood you, you had to correct them. If they doubted you, you had to prove them wrong. If they walked away, you had to chase an answer. If they judged you, you had to defend yourself. But look at what all that explaining cost you. Look at the energy you gave to people who had already decided not to understand. Look at how often you abandoned your own peace, trying to win acceptance from people who were comfortable misjudging you. They underestimated you. They saw your silence and called it weakness. They saw your patience and called it fear. They saw your kindness and called it foolishness. They saw your distance and assumed you had been defeated. But they did not know what was happening inside you. Your silence was not weakness. Sometimes it was self-control. Sometimes it was survival. Sometimes it was observation. You were watching, learning, remembering, healing, rebuilding. And while some people were waiting for you to break, you were quietly discovering what had to change. Because pain has a way of teaching lessons that comfort never explains. Rejection teaches you where you were asking for belonging from the wrong places. Betrayal teaches you to watch actions more carefully than promises. Failure teaches you that confidence without discipline can collapse, but discipline can rebuild what disappointment destroyed. Loneliness can teach you something even more uncomfortable, that sometimes the person you have been avoiding is yourself. And perhaps the deepest lesson of all is this: you can become so accustomed to pain that peace begins to feel unfamiliar. This is why people return to what hurt them, why they repeat the same relationships, the same habits, the same fears, the same self-destructive patterns. The mind can confuse familiar with safe. It can look at an old wound and say, "At least I know this pain." The unknown asks something terrifying of you: to become someone who makes different choices. And different choices can feel wrong before they feel right. That is why growth is not simply learning what hurt you. Growth is recognizing the pattern while it is happening and having the courage to stop participating in it. Healing does not mean pretending nothing happened. It does not mean forgetting every disappointment or becoming blind to what experience taught you. Healing means remembering without remaining imprisoned. It means carrying the lesson without carrying the chain. They underestimated you, but eventually that becomes less important, because the real transformation begins when you stop underestimating yourself, when you stop handing your future to old fears, when you stop calling procrastination waiting for the right time, when you stop calling self-betrayal being nice, when you stop giving unlimited access to people who repeatedly show you that they cannot handle your trust. This is where self-awareness begins. You notice your triggers. You notice the situations that make you desperate for approval. You notice the fear behind your anger, the insecurity behind your over-explaining, the loneliness behind choices you once thought were love. And instead of blaming the entire world, you begin asking a harder question: what can I control now? That question can change a life. You can control your effort, your discipline, your boundaries, your attention, your response. You cannot force people to see your value, but you can stop placing your value in their hands. You cannot rewrite the past, but you can refuse to let the past write every future decision. Truth reveals itself, not always quickly, not always dramatically, but over time, patterns become difficult to ignore. Character reveals itself through repeated behavior. Intentions become clearer when strong emotions settle. Mistakes become lessons when you are willing to study them instead of repeating them. And justice does not require revenge. Sometimes the strongest response is distance. Sometimes the greatest answer is progress. Sometimes winning means refusing to let old pain make new decisions for you. Success is not only money. It is not applause. It is not making the people who doubted you regret their opinions. Real success is becoming harder to manipulate, harder to distract, harder to provoke, and more capable of trusting your own judgment. It is learning to sit quietly while your life changes through consistent action. Your delay was not your ending. Some of the time you thought you were losing was actually teaching you what you could no longer afford to ignore. Some doors closing forced you to develop strengths you would never have chosen voluntarily. You have already survived what once tried to break you. Do not dishonor that survival by returning to the same patterns simply because they are familiar. Focus on yourself, not because the world does not matter, but because your life cannot be built through constant comparison. Stay silent when silence protects your energy. Speak when your voice serves your values. Walk away when staying requires you to betray yourself. Say no when yes would cost too much. Let your actions become more disciplined than your promises. Let your boundaries become clearer than your anger. Let your growth become louder than your explanations. Your legacy is being built, not in the moments when everyone is watching, but in the quiet moments when nobody applauds and you still choose the better path. So be patient with the distance between who you were and who you are becoming. Be wise enough to learn, strong enough to change, disciplined enough to continue, and resilient enough to keep walking. The journey is not over, and sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is grow quietly, move wisely, and keep going until the person you are becoming no longer needs to explain where you have been. One day, you will understand why some battles were never meant to be fought with words. You thought silence meant losing. You thought walking away meant surrender. You thought if you did not defend yourself, explain yourself, or force people to see the truth, then somehow their version of you would become reality. But listen carefully. People can misunderstand your story without changing who you are. They can doubt your ability without reducing your potential. They can speak about your failures without knowing what it took for you to survive them. They underestimated you, and perhaps for a while, you helped them do it. Perhaps you became so focused on proving yourself that you forgot to build yourself. You spent energy reacting instead of creating, explaining instead of improving, watching who supported you instead of asking whether you were supporting yourself. But eventually, something inside you becomes tired, not weak, tired of repeating the same conversations, tired of being misunderstood by people committed to misunderstanding you, tired of reopening wounds just to convince someone that they hurt you. And that exhaustion can become the beginning of wisdom. Because eventually, you realize that peace is not found when everyone finally agrees with you. Peace begins when their agreement is no longer required. Your silence was not weakness. Sometimes it was the first sign that you were learning the difference between a reaction and a decision. A reaction belongs to the moment. A decision belongs to your future. And every time you pause before responding, every time you choose discipline over impulse, every time you refuse to chase someone who has already chosen distance, you are building something inside yourself that no applause can create. Self-respect. The kind that does not need an audience. The kind that survives rejection. The kind that remains standing when nobody understands why you changed. But growth is uncomfortable because your mind is often more attached to familiarity than happiness. This is one of the strange truths about being human. Sometimes you know something is hurting you and still you return. You return to the same kind of relationship, the same destructive habit, the same fear, the same excuse, the same environment that keeps proving it cannot give you what you need. Why? Because familiar pain asks less of you than unfamiliar freedom. Familiar pain already has instructions. You know how to survive it. But a new life requires new behavior, and new behavior makes the mind uncertain. The unknown does not promise comfort. It asks you to become responsible for choices you have never made before. And that is why so many people confuse discomfort with danger. But not everything that feels uncomfortable is wrong. Sometimes discomfort is the feeling of an old pattern losing control over you. Sometimes anxiety appears because you are finally doing something different. Sometimes loneliness appears because you stopped accepting company that required you to betray yourself. Do not run back simply because the old prison feels familiar. You have already survived what once tried to break you. Do not confuse survival with a reason to return. Healing is not forgetting. Healing is not pretending that betrayal did not happen, that rejection did not hurt, or that failure did not leave scars. Healing is being able to look at what happened and say, you taught me something, but you do not get to control me anymore. That is strength, not becoming emotionless, not becoming cold, becoming conscious, knowing what triggers you, and refusing to let every trigger take control of your life, knowing your weaknesses and refusing to hide behind them, knowing your fears and refusing to let them make every decision. This is where your transformation becomes real. You stop waiting for life to become perfect before becoming disciplined. You stop blaming every lost opportunity on someone else. You begin taking responsibility, not for everything that happened to you, but for what happens next. There is a difference. You may not have chosen the betrayal, but you can choose what it teaches you. You may not have chosen rejection, but you can decide whether rejection becomes evidence that you are worthless or evidence that not every door was yours to enter. You may not have chosen failure, but you can choose whether failure becomes your identity or your education. They underestimated you. But the real danger was never their doubt. The real danger was believing it. The most important moment of your life may be the moment you realize that your opinion of yourself has been quietly shaped by people who never truly knew you. And now you must take it back, slowly, honestly, through action, not empty confidence, not pretending to be fearless, through keeping promises to yourself, waking up when you said you would, finishing what you started, saying no when you mean no, leaving when staying destroys your dignity, choosing patience when your emotions demand chaos. This is how confidence is rebuilt, not through shouting, but through evidence. Every disciplined action tells your mind, I can trust myself again. Truth reveals itself. Give it time. People reveal their character through consistency. Situations become clearer when anger settles. Patterns reveal intentions more accurately than dramatic apologies. And when you learn to observe, instead of immediately react, you begin seeing things that emotion once hid from you. Justice does not require revenge. Revenge keeps you emotionally connected to the very thing you claim you want to leave behind. Sometimes the strongest answer is distance. Sometimes the greatest answer is progress. Sometimes the only victory you need is waking up one day and realizing that what once controlled your thoughts no longer controls your decisions. That is freedom. Focus on yourself. Stay silent when words would only feed confusion. Work when others are watching for a reaction. Learn when others are busy judging. Build when others are busy talking. Let them underestimate you if they need to. Their assumptions are not your responsibility. Your responsibility is what you do next. Your delay was not your ending. Your mistakes were not your identity. Your loneliness was not proof that you were unworthy. Your past was not a permanent address. Your legacy is being built every time you choose awareness over impulse, discipline over excuses, and progress over revenge. So do not rush to be understood. Do not beg to be chosen. Do not exhaust yourself trying to correct every false opinion. Some people will only understand you from a distance, and some never will. Keep going anyway. Become patient enough to let time reveal what emotion cannot. Wise enough to learn from what hurt you, strong enough to change what needs changing, and resilient enough to continue when the road becomes quiet. Because sometimes the silence around you is not emptiness at all. It is the space where your stronger, wiser life is finally beginning to take shape. There is a dangerous moment in life when you become tired of being who everyone else expects you to be. Not because you suddenly stop caring, not because your heart becomes cold, but because one day, after enough disappointment, enough rejection, enough broken promises, enough nights spent questioning yourself, you begin to understand something that changes the way you move through the world. Not every person who misunderstands you deserves an explanation. Not every accusation deserves a defense. Not every closed door deserves you standing outside, knocking until your hands bleed. And perhaps that is why you have become quieter. They noticed it. They may have wondered what happened to you. The person who used to explain everything now says less. The person who used to react now watches. The person who once chased answers now walks away from questions that have no honest answer. They underestimated you. They thought your silence meant they had defeated you, but they did not see what was happening beneath the surface. Your silence was not weakness. It was sometimes self-control. It was sometimes exhaustion. It was sometimes survival. And sometimes it was the first intelligent decision you had made in a long time. Because not every battle makes you stronger. Some battles only keep you distracted. Some arguments are traps with no exit. Some people do not ask questions because they want the truth. They ask because they want access to your emotions. And when you finally understand that, something changes. You stop giving everyone a front row seat to your mind. You stop announcing every plan before it has the chance to grow. You stop trying to make people understand decisions they were never responsible for making. You begin to protect your attention. And attention is one of the most valuable things you possess. Whatever repeatedly receives your attention begins to shape your emotional world. Give all your attention to betrayal, and betrayal may become the center of your identity. Give all your attention to people who rejected you, and their absence can begin to feel more important than your own future. Give all your attention to proving someone wrong, and you may spend years building a life that was never truly yours. That is why focusing on yourself is not selfishness. It is responsibility. It is the decision to ask, what am I building when nobody is watching? Because eventually you have to face the uncomfortable truth that no amount of anger can replace discipline. No amount of blaming can replace action. No amount of dreaming can replace the daily decisions that create a different life. They underestimated you. But before you become obsessed with proving them wrong, ask yourself something deeper. How long have you been underestimating yourself? How many times did fear make a decision before you even tried? How many opportunities did you avoid because failure seemed more painful than regret? How many times did you return to a place, a habit, a relationship, or a pattern that had already shown you its cost? Human beings often return to familiar pain because familiarity creates the illusion of safety. The mind can become attached to what it already knows, even when what it knows is slowly destroying it. A painful relationship can feel safer than an unknown future. A destructive habit can feel easier than the discomfort of change. An old fear can feel more believable than a new possibility. This is how patterns survive. Not because you are incapable of change, but because the familiar can become emotionally persuasive. You know how to survive there. You know what pain to expect. But growth asks you to walk somewhere. Your old instincts cannot guide you, and that can feel terrifying. The new path may feel lonely. The new boundary may feel rude. The new discipline may feel exhausting. The new version of you may even feel unfamiliar to you. But unfamiliar does not mean wrong. Sometimes it simply means you are no longer repeating what once controlled you. This is the psychological awakening. The moment you begin to see yourself clearly, you notice what makes you angry. You notice what makes you seek approval. You notice the situations where fear disguises itself as caution and where insecurity disguises itself as loyalty. You notice how quickly you react when an old wound is touched. And instead of saying, "This is just who I am," you begin asking, "Why do I keep doing this?" That question can open a door no one else can open for you. Because awareness gives you a choice, and choice gives you power. Maybe you cannot control what people say. Maybe you cannot control who leaves, who disappoints you, or who misunderstands your intentions. But you can control whether their behavior becomes the blueprint for your future. You can decide who receives your time. You can decide what deserves your energy. You can decide whether an old wound will become an excuse or a lesson. Healing does not mean becoming blind to the past. It means refusing to keep paying for it with your future. You remember what happened, but you learn from it. You recognize the pattern, but you do not automatically repeat it. You feel the emotion, but you do not allow every emotion to become a command. That is emotional strength, not the absence of feeling. The ability to feel deeply without surrendering your entire life to the feeling of the moment. Truth reveals itself. It often does not arrive with a dramatic confession. It appears through repetition, through what people consistently do, through the promises they repeatedly break, through the respect they show only when it benefits them, through the patterns you once ignored because accepting the truth felt more painful than believing another excuse. But time has a way of making patterns visible. When the noise settles, you see more clearly. And when you see clearly, revenge begins to lose its attraction. Justice does not require revenge. Revenge keeps your attention tied to the past. It asks you to spend more of your life responding to what already hurt you. Progress asks something different. It asks you to become so aware that the same door no longer leads you into the same room. Sometimes the strongest response is distance. Sometimes the greatest answer is discipline. Sometimes winning means waking up and realizing that the thing that once controlled your thoughts no longer controls your choices. That is not weakness. That is freedom. Your delay was not your ending. Some seasons were slow because you were learning what speed could never teach. Some failures exposed weaknesses that success would have hidden. Some loneliness forced you to discover whether you could trust your own company. Some rejection prevented you from continuing to beg for places where you were never able to become fully yourself. And now, your responsibility is not to romanticize the pain. Pain is painful. Betrayal hurts. Failure disappoints. Loneliness can be heavy. But you can still decide what happens after the pain. You can become bitter, or you can become more discerning. You can become closed, or you can become more selective. You can keep explaining, or you can let your actions speak over time. Your legacy is being built in these decisions, not in one dramatic moment, not in a speech, not in a promise made when emotion is high. It is being built quietly, through repetition, through the mornings when you do what needs to be done, even when nobody is encouraging you, through the boundaries you maintain when breaking them would be easier, through the moments when you refuse to return to what is familiar simply because the future is uncertain. You have already survived what once tried to break you. Remember that. But do not stop there. Survival is not the final chapter. Learn, adjust, build, focus on yourself. Stay silent when silence gives you space to think. Speak when speaking protects your values. Walk away when staying requires self-betrayal. Let people underestimate you if they choose to. You have work to do that does not require their permission. And as the days pass, let patience teach you what urgency never could. Let wisdom grow from what experience revealed. Let discipline carry you when motivation disappears. And let resilience remind you that every step forward matters, because the strongest life is not built by those who never fall, but by those who learn, rise, grow, and continue the journey with a quieter mind and a wiser heart. So now let the noise become quieter. Let the opinions become smaller. Let the faces of those who doubted you stop living rent-free inside your mind. You do not have to chase them. You do not have to convince them. You do not have to spend another day proving that your pain was real, your intentions were honest, or your future deserves to exist. They underestimated you, but that chapter does not have to define the rest of your life. The real question now is whether you will continue to underestimate yourself. Will you keep returning to the same patterns because they are familiar? Will you keep reopening doors that have already shown you what waits behind them? Or will you finally accept that growth sometimes begins with one quiet decision? I will not go back. Not because I am angry, not because I need revenge, but because I have learned. Your silence was not weakness. It was the space where you began to hear yourself again. Your delay was not your ending. It was time spent discovering what needed to change before you were ready to move forward. Truth reveals itself. People reveal themselves. Patterns reveal themselves. And when you finally see clearly, do not betray your own awareness just to keep something familiar. Justice does not require revenge. You do not need to destroy anyone to rebuild yourself. You do not need to watch someone fall in order to rise. Let distance do what arguments could not do. Let discipline do what anger never could do. Let progress answer the questions that no explanation ever could. Focus on yourself. Protect your time. Guard your attention. Be careful where you place your trust. Become disciplined when nobody is watching. Become patient when progress feels slow. Become strong enough to walk away and wise enough to know why. Because your legacy is being built right now in the choices nobody sees, in the habits nobody applauds, in the moments when you could return to the old version of yourself, but choose not to. You have already survived what once tried to break you. Now do more than survive. Learn from it. Build from it. Grow beyond it. Let the past be a teacher, not a prison. Let failure become information, not identity. Let rejection become redirection toward a life that does not require you to beg for your place. And when the road becomes quiet, do not mistake the silence for emptiness. Sometimes silence is where the strongest part of you is being built. So keep going. Slowly if necessary. Quietly if necessary. Alone for a while if necessary. But keep going. Let patience shape your judgment. Let wisdom guide your choices. Let discipline carry you when motivation disappears. And let resilience remind you that every difficult step has taught you something about your strength. You do not need to announce your transformation. You do not need permission to begin again. Just focus. Stay silent. Keep building. And one day, when you look back at everything that tried to stop you, you will understand that the greatest victory was never proving them wrong. It was becoming someone strong enough, wise enough, and patient enough to keep moving forward without needing to look back.